Hi everybody, Miss C here with your weekly quiz review. So I'm going to go through the 14 questions that you guys had due last week before spring break, and then hopefully this clears up any questions that you may have had while you took it. A lot of these don't really have an explanation because they do come directly just from the notes, so if it's one of those questions that doesn't require further explanation, please make sure to look in your PowerPoints, but I will be sure to do my best. So let's get started. So question number 1. Which is the most common contamination source for freshwater resources? The answer is A, runoff water, because runoff water carries with it all of the pesticides, all of the fertilizer, everything that contaminates other sources of water. It contaminates groundwater, it contaminates like freshwater sources, it contaminates lakes. So that is why runoff water, which is when water literally runs off because it's at a decline or because it's flowing, that is why that's a number 1 source. Question number 2, which is the best way to conserve worldwide freshwater resources? It's to use more efficient irrigation techniques. That's where a lot of our freshwater goes, is irrigation, which is, remember, those giant sprinkler systems that we use in farming, and that ties back into one of the earlier units where we talked about sustainable versus traditional farming. So hopefully you've seen the common theme of everything tying in. It would not be to build more roads and highways for cars and trucks. It would not be to increase the amount of land use to raise cattle. It would not be to develop more modern coal-powered plants, because literally none of those have anything to do with water. And again, a lot of our fresh water is lost to irrigation. Number 3, what would most likely result if more farms were developed along river basins in North Carolina? If more farms were developed around river basins, then there would be an increase in water pollution because of all the pesticides and the fertilizers again. So it all kind of comes back to that. Remember when those get into water sources, because they're so good at making plants grow and keeping off insects and things, the pesticides are putting harmful chemicals in the water, and the fertilizer is helping the algae grow. And the algae kind of suffocates the water system that it starts to bloom in when it gets to a point where sorry, I got distracted, you guys. Where it gets to a point where it's infiltrated the system so much that the algae is just blooming at an unstoppable rate. Number 4, if people in an area have limited access to freshwater resources, what will most likely result? If people have a limited access to freshwater resources, then a decrease in sanitation and an increase in disease in the area will rise. So that is a pretty direct correlation. It wouldn't decrease weathering and erosion. It wouldn't increase biodiversity. And it doesn't increase the number of aquifers. So if you really think about it, if you have limited access to freshwater resources, you're less likely to waste fat on things like hygiene, where it's necessary for you to drink. And that's kind of what ties into the human impacts on freshwater. So if you need a refresher, it would be in that PowerPoint. Number 5, which of the following is most responsible for reducing the availability of freshwater in this country? Non-point source pollution. Again, that comes directly from the notes, so be sure to creep back on there, but most of you did get that one right. Number 6, which result is most likely to occur after excessive withdrawal of groundwater in coastal areas? If you're withdrawing groundwater excessively, then the salt water is going to be able to seep back into the water table, so the answer would be D. Because there's still space in those aquifers that are underground. When that fresh water is gone, you're just going to, it's going to make the ground more permeable, and it's going to soak up more of the water that's available, and that water will be salt water because it's coastal. What is a possible consequence of the destruction of a marsh? Would be decreasing filtering of water, because remember, marshes are thick, and they have lots of reeds, and the clay and the sand and the silt there is a little different, so it acts as a really good filter for all of that water coming in and out. So the answer would be B to number 7. This one's a mouthful. Number 8. Saltwater intrusion can occur in aquifers near coastlines, where fresh water in the aquifer is displaced by saltwater. Coastline aquifers become more vulnerable to saltwater intrusion when fresh water recharges recharge rates are low or withdrawal rates are high. An aquifer in which of the following areas would be most affected by saltwater intrusion? It would be a growing coastal city undergoing a drought. Number 9. A student created a diagram of a farmland with runoff from cornfields to a nearby pond. What was the student probably trying to model? If it's running off from farmland and cornfields into a nearby pond, it's probably going to talk about how fertilizers can get into ponds and cause algae blooms. So your answer would be letter C. Sorry guys, I'm getting tongue-tied. Number 10, this is the one with the chart. I am not going to read all of this because it is like 3 paragraphs, but it is asking, one second. It's asking which of the following manufacturers could claim to have achieved the greatest success in the development and marketing of water conservation technology. And so you're going to look for the 2 bars that are furthest apart, because it's showing the REUWs and then Tacoma. And the ones that have the biggest difference are clothes washers manufacturers, because it goes from almost 40% down to 23%. And that is the greatest margin of difference. Number 11, a community decides to upgrade its water purification and management systems. What lasting impact could this have on available fresh water? It could cause an increase in the fresh water supply if it's trying to purify them and increase its purification and management. Acid precipitation can dissolve aluminum from soil. As aluminum is dissolved, it can flow into lakes and contaminate the water. High concentrations of aluminum in lakes are fatal to many forms of aquatic life. This scenario provides evidence of which of the following concepts. The answer would be A, environmental change can impact the quality of life for living organisms. Again, coming straight from your human impacts PowerPoint. How will the presence of power plants burning fossil fuels most likely affect the water cycle? Sulfur and nitrogen, which make up a big part of fossil fuels, the emissions of those would dissolve in the rainwater and form acid rain, which is happening at a rapid rate all over the world. And so your answer would be A. And then number 14, what would be the most sustainable way to reduce farm use of river water in coastal area? And it would be to use drip irrigation systems so that you're not just blindly irrigating a certain amount all the time, and you're really managing how much water you're using during irrigation. So it's not like sprinkler systems that are going off constantly. So that is a quick review of the 14 questions. Hopefully that makes sense. Let me know. I'm going to send out a survey later this week on if these videos are helpful, how they could be more helpful. And so please be sure to be on the lookout for that. I'll probably send that out around Wednesday after everyone has a chance to look at this one. We're all kind of new to this and we're all in this together, so please feel free to give me your most honest feedback, and it'll be greatly appreciated. Good job this week, you guys. I love you and I miss you, and I hope